I'm the gold digger in the story, the woman who uses men to get money, power, and status. My twin sister, Annie, is the opposite: proud, headstrong, fiercely self-reliant. She looks down on my ways. I can't help but roll my eyes at her idealism. But when I overheard her freeloading boyfriend joking about how independent she was, I couldn't stay quiet. I called her immediately. "Did you hear that, Annie?" I said, my tone sharp. "Independent woman is just a trap. They put you on a pedestal so they can enjoy the perks without lifting a finger. If you know how to use a man to get ahead, that's a skill. Why ignore it?" She didn't answer. The next day, though, I heard she finally dumped him after 5 wasted years. I realized my place in this story very early. Everyone knew who I was, the notorious woman destined to use her looks and wits to climb ladders of wealth and influence. Annie, of course, was the golden girl. Relying on anyone for help was shameful to her. She believed a woman must build everything with her own hands. The instant I understood her role, I grasped mine too. I was meant to be the foil, the dark mirror proving a point. A woman's success should be earned alone, never borrowed from a man. For a moment, it stung. I wasn't the hero of this tale. But then I realized, just because I wasn't the protagonist didn't mean my story had to be small. If the author wanted to condemn my choices, I would simply rewrite them in my own way. So I embraced my role, the woman labeled a gold digger, and began crafting my life within the margins of the story, on my own terms. Even as little kids, Annie and I couldn't have been more different. At 5 or 6, when friendship revolved around sharing candy and snacks, our personalities had already split into opposites. Because we were identical twins and cute enough to draw attention, the boys in class were always offering us sweets. Annie would stare them down with that stubborn, serious look of hers and refuse every time. I, on the other hand, always accepted with a cheerful smile. One day, she frowned at me. "Anya, you don't even like candy. Why do you take it?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Because, Annie, they're not giving us candy for the candy. They're offering friendship. They want us to say yes. Besides, their parents gave them those treats to share. If we don't accept them, someone else will. Why turn down kindness?" She looked away, uncertain. I knew she loved sweets, and part of her wanted to accept, but that invisible rule she carried, the one that said a girl must never owe anyone, kept her frozen. Next time, I told her, "Just take it. Think of it as letting someone be kind." After a long pause, she gave me the smallest nod. The very next day after school, a shy little boy shuffled up to Annie, his arms full of snacks. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Annie, these are for you. Will you be my friend?" I stood a few steps away, curious to see how she'd react. She looked at the pile of treats, her lips parting as if to refuse, but the words wouldn't come. Then slowly she reached out. That's when it happened. A sharp, scolding voice sliced through the air. "Annie, what do you think you're doing? You can't just take things from boys." We turned toward the gate. Our parents were standing there, faces filled with shock and disappointment. They rushed over, pulled her aside, and began lecturing her in front of everyone. "Annie, how could you do that? Taking things from a boy, what does that say about you? It's greedy at best, shameless at worst. A proper girl doesn't accept favors like that." The poor boy turned crimson and ran off, leaving his snacks scattered across the ground. Annie stood there, silent and small, while our parents scolded her. Every so often, she'd glance at me, her lips trembling as if she wanted to defend herself. She never did. Maybe she was wondering why I didn't see what she did as disgraceful, why I didn't think kindness needed to be punished. After that day, Annie built walls around herself. She refused every bit of help offered to her, especially from boys. By middle school, we were in the same class again. Annie's grades were solid, but chemistry dragged her down, keeping her out of the top ranks. Her seatmate, Peter Vance, was the school's chemistry prodigy, always topping the charts. Peter, feeling bad for his desk mate, tried to help her a few times. "Want me to show you how I solved this one?" he asked. "Thanks," Annie said briskly, "but I'll figure it out myself." After a few attempts, he gave up trying. It was funny because, in the story I seemed trapped in, Peter was the designated flirt, the boy who'd chase my sister, fail to win her, then turn his attention to me, the identical twin. I was supposed to fall for his charm, mistake his potential for stability, and let my grades slip until I landed in a mediocre school. But I was no fool. A clever woman doesn't get lost in the fantasy. She takes what's useful and keeps her eyes on the goal. When Peter's interest shifted from Annie to me, I didn't discourage him. I used it. I brought him lists of chemistry problems I couldn't solve and let him tutor me every afternoon. After each session, I'd thank him with a soda or a snack. One day, while sipping his drink, he finally asked, "Anya, why are you and your sister so different?" I tilted my head. Different how? He thought for a moment. She hates relying on anyone, but you know how to use people. I smiled as I zipped my backpack. That's not using, Peter. That's leveraging. You see, only capable men have real value to offer. Recognizing that value isn't manipulation, it's strategy. His ego swelled instantly. "You know," he said, grinning, "I don't mind being used by you. But when do I get to call you my girlfriend?" I met his gaze and smiled sweetly. "When you help me get into Northwood Prep." His grin widened. "That's it? Consider it done." For Peter, helping me had been simple. 6 months later, I walked into the state's most prestigious prep school, entrance exam results in hand, with the second highest score in the city. The first thing I did? I blocked him. Every number, every social media account. Annie, who had earned her place through sheer determination, was horrified. "You promised him you'd be his girlfriend if you got in. What do you call this?" I shrugged. How many girls has Peter toyed with? Is it only okay for a guy to manipulate feelings, but wrong for a girl to take advantage of an opportunity? Her brow furrowed. "Anya, if you keep relying on men to succeed, you'll regret it someday." "I don't mind," I said coolly. The grades I earned with his help were real. I did the work. Annie stared, as if I were a lost cause. Our relationship, though never exceptionally close, had been passable. After this, however, she started to distance herself. She was the story's independent heroine. Naturally, she looked down on my methods. Before long, we were strangers in the eyes of everyone around us. People were shocked to learn we were sisters. Wait, Anya and Annie Ashton are sisters. But they never even talk. It was true. We barely spoke at school, and at home, conversations were rare and clipped. At home, Annie was the sun around which our family revolved. I was just background scenery, rarely acknowledged unless to contrast her brilliance. Like tonight, when our parents had cooked a celebratory feast for Annie topping her class. That was the only time they'd compare me to her. "Anya, your sister is at the top. You? Your grades are slipping. You're not even in the top 50 anymore." Their words no longer stung. Even if I had been number one, they would have reserved all their praise for Annie. I was her foil, nothing more. Annie, of course, thought it was all my choice. Later, as I headed to my room, she intercepted me, calm but quietly triumphant. "Do you see now?" she asked. "See what?" I replied. "You can't rely on others forever. True security comes from yourself. Peter helped you back then, yes, but what about now? You need to study on your own. It's not too late." Her lecture was grating. Did she really think I hadn't worked my tail off for those scores just because Peter helped? Changing the topic, I said, "By the way, I have a boyfriend now. We're applying to universities abroad together, and his family is covering everything." Her face froze, disappointment etched into her features. "Anya, nothing comes free. Everything has a price." I shrugged. "I don't care." From that point on, Annie and I became strangers. I hadn't wanted it to come to this. We weren't rivals in the traditional sense, and I understood her pride as the story's protagonist. Some of her warnings even came from genuine concern. But we were two extremes, destined to drift apart as our values collided. As college entrance exams loomed, I was a bundle of nerves, juggling test prep with applications abroad. Everyone was in the final stretch, and that's when Annie got caught up in a relationship. Her boyfriend, Ryan Miller, was a broke boy from her class with nothing to his name but charm. The news shook the school. Annie was their golden student, the Ivy League hopeful, and they feared the distraction would tank her grades, or worse, affect her performance under pressure. So, they turned to me, asking me to intervene as her sister. I refused at first. She wouldn't listen to me. Her homeroom teacher, however, insisted. Annie often asked about my grades and class rank, she said, secretly admiring me. I was the perfect person to guide her, she argued. So one afternoon, I waited for her outside her classroom. When Annie saw me waiting outside her classroom, surprise flickered across her face before she masked it with her usual calm. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I didn't waste time. "I heard you have a boyfriend." She shrugged, unbothered. "So, I wanted to see who could make you risk everything just before the biggest exams of your life. Is he handsome? Is his family wealthy? How are his grades? Her expression shifted to one of quiet disdain. His family isn't wealthy, his grades are average. He's not someone you'd be interested in. But I don't care. I can achieve anything I want without relying on anyone. Exactly what I expected, an impasse. I started to turn away, but couldn't resist one last comment. Annie, the biggest mistake you can make with a man is expecting nothing from him. You can take everything, but it's not fair to leave him with nothing. Her reply was sharp and cold. Thanks for the advice. I don't need it. My attempt to reason with Annie failed. The school eventually had to separate her and Ryan into different classes. Meanwhile, I continued with my plans, exams, applications, and preparations for studying abroad. By the time my boyfriend and I received our acceptance letters to a top foreign university, Annie's path was also secure. She hadn't let a relationship derail her studies or lower her ambitions. Still, I knew Ryan Miller was trouble. Annie's romance wouldn't last, and perhaps the author intended that hardship as part of her heroine arc. Everyone has their own path. Annie seemed content, and I knew I couldn't or shouldn't interfere. Her story might have a few bumps, but she was the protagonist. I, on the other hand, was the calculated side character. Every move I made had to be precise. There was no narrative armor protecting me. Once I left for university abroad, Annie and I lost touch completely. I became a forgotten figure in the story, a background character fading from relevance. But I never stopped advancing. I seized every opportunity. I studied relentlessly, earned scholarships, interned, networked, and launched a business. Eventually, I left the boyfriend who had helped me get abroad for someone wealthier, more ambitious, and useful to my career. When he found out, he stormed to my apartment, furious. Anya, you've got some nerve.
You used me.
After all I spent on you, and now you dump me? Either pay me back or break up with this new guy. I smiled faintly, tossing him a check. $3 million should cover your expenses with interest. He froze. The girl who had begged him for a way abroad 2 years ago now casually tossed millions at him. It wasn't entirely surprising. While he relied on his parents and laziness, I had used my position to network, invest, and seize opportunities. If he'd worked harder, maybe I would have stayed longer. I leaned closer, voice laced with ice. Don't pretend you ever loved me. I know exactly how you described me to your friends over the years. I'll remind you, you said I was cheap, easy, just a girl you could buy with a little money. You joked I wasn't even fit to polish your shoes. And now you stand here, acting heartbroken. I delivered it calmly, letting every word land. His face twisted in disbelief. Anya, you're terrifying. All these years, did you hate me this much? You're an incredible actress. I let out a soft laugh and closed the door. Of course, that wasn't the whole story. He had been my first real relationship, and I had felt something for him. But learning his true opinion of me turned those feelings into cold calculation. Overseas, I thrived. With my ambition and focus, I built experience, capital, and a network. Eventually, I returned home to launch my own company. But when I came back, I learned that Annie's life wasn't going as smoothly as it should have. Annie had graduated from Yale. On paper, she should have been on a fast track to greatness. But I heard that, to avoid a long-distance situation with Ryan, she'd abandoned plans for grad school and returned home to work. Her degree was in a specialized tech field, but her hometown offered no suitable opportunities. She ended up in an administrative role unrelated to her studies, earning a modest salary. Ryan, with no real skills, decided to start a business and constantly demanded money from Annie. And Annie, completely under his spell, gave him everything he asked for, draining herself in the process. When I heard this from a mutual friend, I paused. My friend was shocked. Anya, aren't you going to do something? That's your sister. I smiled faintly, thinking back to a moment 5 years ago, a determined, stubborn girl standing before me. I can get everything I want on my own, without needing a man. I believed it. Annie was capable. She would eventually get everything she deserved. I didn't need to interfere. As I left the restaurant, I passed a private room and heard her name. Annie Ashton? She's an idiot, Ryan's voice sneered. I quickly pulled out my phone and dialed Annie. When she answered, confused, I didn't speak. I held the phone close so she could hear everything. She's so cheap, Ryan bragged to his friends. Brainwashed into being some kind of independent woman. She never asks for anything, yet she gives me everything. That's the girlfriend you want. Too proud to ask, too obedient to refuse. I slipped into the stairwell as he continued. "Did you hear that, Annie?" I said into the phone. "Independent woman is a trap. It's a pedestal they put you on so they can enjoy convenience. If you can use a man to get ahead, that's a skill. Why wouldn't you?" After a long silence, she hung up. I assumed it had been another fruitless attempt. But the next day, I heard Annie had finally kicked her freeloading boyfriend of 5 years to the curb. I had expected her to end things, but not this decisively. She moved out of their shared apartment and showed up at my doorstep, suitcases in hand. I smirked. "Annie, what's this?" "I'm not running a shelter for the heartbroken." She met my gaze calmly. "Anya, I know you're starting a company. I can help." I leaned back, skeptical. "Your degree isn't in finance, and your work experience is purely administrative. Why should I believe you can contribute? Even if you're my sister, I don't back freeloaders." Unfazed, she said, "Anya, I've been away, but no one knows you better than I do. I know what you're capable of. I wouldn't have come if I didn't bring value." "Curious?" I asked, "and what exactly is your value?" Her reply was simple and firm. "A man." I stared at her in disbelief. "Annie, are you serious?" An hour later, we were sitting in a coffee shop, and through the window I saw him. Caleb Reed, the AI prodigy whose face I'd only ever seen in tech magazines. I glanced at Annie. "This is the man you're bringing me?" Caleb had developed a groundbreaking AI and turned down an 8-figure corporate offer. Annie nodded. "That's him. He pursued me for 3 years at Yale. I figured you're back, but haven't settled on your startup's direction. I thought he might inspire some ideas." I was stunned. Even her casual connections were this high level. Unlike me, who had to work her way up meticulously, she attracted genius effortlessly. "Why stick with Ryan when someone like him pursued you?" I asked. Annie looked at me meaningfully. I was foolish. I wanted to earn my place beside him independently. But if he's willing to share his success, why not accept it? A slow smile spread across my face. Finally, she understood. Inside the coffee shop, Caleb could barely keep his eyes off Annie. Despite his legendary reputation, he seemed almost innocent. "Annie, it's been a long time," he stammered. "How have you been? I wondered why you called yesterday." Annie's expression softened, full of gentle concern. "Caleb, it's been too long. Since graduation, I've thought of you often. I'd wonder if you were taking care of yourself." His eyes glistened. "It's my fault for making you worry." I gave her a mental thumbs up. She had mastered the art of influence. Within minutes, the conversation pivoted to our startup. Caleb, learning that Annie and I were partners, immediately offered not only his technology, but access to investors. "I might not have much cash," he said, eyes on Annie, "but I have investors interested in my tech. I know experts in finance and operations who can help us." I nearly fell over. This wasn't just a partnership. He was building a company for her. Annie feigned modesty. "I couldn't ask that of you. I only wanted your advice." Caleb waved her concerns away. "It's no trouble. I'll fly back tonight and start making arrangements." In a whirlwind, he was gone, leaving us with a flood of opportunity and momentum. I sat there, still reeling from the sudden turn of events. "Annie, am I dreaming? Did he really arrange all this for us?" "You're not dreaming," she said calmly. "It's real." I had to ask, "What on earth did you do to make him so devoted?" She smiled faintly. "I met him in my sophomore year. Same research lab. He wasn't famous then. One day, I saw him running data all day without a break, so I left a can of porridge on his desk." I blinked. "That's it? One can of porridge? And now he's building a company for us because of that?" Annie nodded, a hint of hesitation in her eyes. "I guess, when you put it like that, yes." So this was the magnetic pull of a protagonist. Any man she attracted, even beyond her designated love interest, was remarkable. Meanwhile, I had spent over 20 years scheming and leveraging men, and none had ever shown that kind of devotion. I realized then that I had been leveraging the wrong resource all along. The ultimate advantage wasn't any of the men I'd used. It was Annie herself. True to his word, Caleb secured our first round of funding and assembled a team of talented managers within a week. Even as someone who had always seen men as tools, I felt a twinge of guilt in the face of his genuine enthusiasm. I suggested giving him the largest share of the company, but he refused without hesitation. "I don't want to run a business," he said. "I just want to focus on tech. But if you ever need help, call me. I'll do whatever I can." After setting everything up, he rushed off to catch a flight, barely pausing for dinner. I shook my head in admiration. Caleb is a real man, I said. So reliable. If I'd met men like him earlier, I wouldn't have wanted to use them. I'd have wanted to build something together. Annie smiled. Do you really believe that? I nodded earnestly. I do. I only ever used men who were trying to use me. Peter wanted me for my looks. My ex just wanted to boost his ego. I spoke casually, but when I looked at her, I saw a look of genuine sympathy. Anya, she said softly, you must have been exhausted all these years. Her concern hit me like a punch, and I felt a sting of tears. Of course it had been exhausting, constantly navigating ambitions, intentions, and strategies. Constantly scheming to get ahead. For years, everyone assumed Annie and I were at odds. But she had always cared in her quiet way. In high school, when my grades slipped, she lectured me on self-reliance while secretly checking with teachers about my progress. Messy notebooks with careful notes would appear on my desk, disguised to hide her handwriting. When I studied abroad, our parents never called. But every few months, care packages arrived, snacks, essentials, always from Yale. We were like twin flowers growing back to back. Different ambitions, separate growth, yet able to shield each other in critical moments. I didn't answer her words. I just reached for her hand. It's okay, Annie. That's all behind us. Things will be easier from now on. She met my gaze, nodding gently. I'm here now. It won't be so hard. For the first time in years, the tension between us dissolved. Over the following months, Annie and I worked tirelessly to build our company. She handled online development and quality control. I oversaw distribution, networking, and fundraising. Within a year, our company became a massive success. Net profits surpassed 50 million, and we expanded rapidly. Amid the AI boom, our startup emerged as a dark horse, dominating the market. The media clamored for interviews. I saw it as a marketing opportunity and agreed to a few. Annie had preferred to stay in the background, planning to attend alone, but this time, she insisted on coming with me. She sat across from me, eyes bright with newfound confidence. Two sisters building an empire together. Isn't that a better story? Plus, we need to praise Caleb publicly. It will ensure he continues supporting us fully. I smiled. Annie had certainly learned a thing or two. The interview started normally, with questions about our company's journey and future goals. Then a reporter asked a pointed question. Ms. Ashton, your family wasn't wealthy, yet you studied abroad after high school and raised your first round of capital there. I also understand you had a certain reputation in high school, dating only academically gifted, wealthy boys. How do you respond to claims that you were a high-class gold digger? I forced a polite smile and tried to deflect, but she pressed further. Your company markets itself under the banner of female independence, yet your own success was supported by men. Isn't that misleading? Before I could respond, Annie stood and guided me out of the room. Anya, don't panic, she said calmly. This is a trap. Whatever you say will be twisted to fit their narrative. That reporter isn't acting in good faith. I hesitated, but it's true. I've relied on men to get where I am. Annie's smile was unwavering. Do you remember what you said to me years ago when I accused you of relying on men? You said I couldn't dismiss your hard work just because someone helped. It's the same here. Your efforts stand on their own. Don't worry. I've got this. The next morning, an article went viral. The headline read, "Is the independent woman a modern-day scam?" It included a recording of the reporter's questions, followed by a statement that resonated with women everywhere. When a woman accepts support from a man legally and reasonably, she's labeled a gold digger. When men accept support from women, it's called independence. The double standard is glaring. The article also recounted Annie's story, how Ryan had leached off her during their relationship. Social media exploded. Women shared their own experiences, calling out the hypocrisy. Public outrage grew when it was revealed that Ryan had paid the reporter to ambush me. He was sued for defamation and lost. The reporter was fired and blacklisted. Justice had been served. Afterward, our company's profile skyrocketed. Investors lined up, eager to back us. Annie and I continued innovating, expanding our reach, and growing our brand. Within 5 years, we took the company public on NASDAQ, reaching a market capitalization of over $100 billion. On IPO day, standing on the balcony dressed in our finest, a reporter asked what advice we had for women today. Annie smiled. My sister has always had a clear vision for women's independence. I think she should answer. I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice calm and firm. Being an independent woman doesn't mean you do everything alone. It means knowing your worth and using every resource wisely. Climb with confidence, keep your head high, and never be afraid to leverage your opportunities. I paused, then concluded. My wish for every woman is this: be resilient, be defiant, stand tall, and never let anyone define your limits. Applause erupted. Annie and I exchanged a look and smiled. In that moment, the gold digger and the heroine finally found peace.